Okay, it's Movember 2025, and I haven't made some Movember videos for a while for recovery, but I got inspired yesterday by a tragedy, actually. A friend of mine lost someone who was a member of a 12-step fellowship, and he died by misadventure. So I'm not going to name him or anyone involved, but I will dedicate this, as they sometimes finish 12-step meetings, by saying, let's take a moment of silence for the addicts in and out of the rooms that are still suffering. And so I thought for this Movember, I'll make some videos around recovery, and I won't make one every day. So if you're catching this video just as part of visiting my channel, or you might be coming for counseling, then I hope this is helpful. And today what I focused on is I've got to get this Prezi video thing worked out, but Facing Addiction by Dr. Patrick Carnes. I'm a certified sex addiction therapist and addictions therapist, and I'm a man in recovery, and I thought I would focus today on just a snapshot page he has in this book called Barriers to Recovery, things that get in the way. A lot of people relapse and they go back, and it's because they're generally wanting to feel less. Dr. Robert Weiss talks about that in his book, and I'll probably do something out of this book, Porn Addiction 101, where he talks about addicts of all kinds generally use to feel less, not feel better. And it's confusing for others because they think that we're sort of having a party. But once you've crossed that line and become an addict, it can become difficult, and the party's generally over and you're using now to feel less. So I want to go through over this month some videos and tools about recovery. I'll probably talk about that, the addictive cycle, what makes an addict, how do you know if you're an addict or not. But today this is really geared at people that are in recovery, know that there's a problem, but they might go back to relapse. And so we'll look at some of the things that can be indicators that you're in trouble and in that area. So, number one, belief you're cured and can return back to responsible use. For drug addicts and alcoholics, this can happen just by thinking, I can socially drink again, and maybe have a glass of wine at dinner, or maybe if you're at a concert and you think, oh, maybe I could just have a smoke of a joint. For food addicts, they regularly go back and think, well, I've lost all the weight now, I think maybe I can go back onto processed food or carbohydrates, and they just, you get a little bit of distance, you minimize, you forget the pain pretty quickly, and we can just go back and start to get some impaired thinking that, well, maybe we're okay now. And it seems to be that once your brain has wrapped itself around an addiction for any period of time and it's become a chronic illness, that responsible use seems to be lost for most of us. I haven't had to drink for 39 years and 6 months, and I have not gone back because I've heard other people with long periods of sobriety, and they just don't successfully activate that behavior again. So it can be, just an impaired thought that we generally keep private. So if you're struggling in this area, talk to someone. Let them know that you're thinking along these lines. Not understanding cross addiction. That one, plenty of people that suffer with sex and love addiction, where they go into heavy fantasy and ritual around dating, can find themselves, if they're in recovery from alcoholism, having a drink because they're in the intensity of the addiction, or they're at some point in that addictive cycle, and they just need to feel less to continue. So you'll see people with pornography addictions maybe using sugar as a way of medicating. So and so one can trigger another. And so getting an understanding for yourself personally of what other addictions might be co-occurring with the addiction that I'm struggling with, just so one doesn't trigger the other. I know at a hospital I worked at, they realized that getting people off nicotine at the same time as dealing with other chemical addictions gave them a much lower relapse rate, and so they made it a nicotine-free program with some success. Lack of 12-step meeting attendance. I'm not sure. I've been listening to a series by John Eldridge on what what can't you do without, or what can't you imagine other people get sober or get well without. And in his case, it's a Christian community, and they're talking about, as a follower of Jesus, what couldn't you live without, And so for me, I don't understand how people can do this on their own. Addiction has a whole lot of shame to it. And so a lot of the times it's shame that stops us going to a 12-step meeting, especially if it's for sex addiction, because that just seems to be the most awful thing that you could imagine spending time talking to other people about. So most fellowships have some guidance around this. You'll hear regularly 90 meetings in 90 days. Sounds too much. Where do you fit it in? But when you've got the disruption of an addictive disorder, it's a mental health condition, we need a lot of correction. We need a lot of support. It's not just about stopping doing something. It's about learning to live another way. So what you want to look for, barriers for your recovery would be not doing enough. And so here is somewhere you can just have a look. How am I doing with meetings? And this is really, I could do and might do a whole video on just 12-step meetings, especially if you're doing it online. People used to go to meetings in person. Now they do a lot of their recovery online. So meeting attendance, how to have good etiquette when you're attending meetings, having your camera on, being present, not multitasking, things like that. So not just meeting attendance, but being there, not on your phone, not checking your emails, engaging, and not being a tourist, being part of the program. Looking for differences rather than similarities. With every human being, we're unique. And so we can do our addiction different than someone else does their addiction. So what you're looking for generally, a simple way to do similarities, not differences, is, well, where am I powerless? Where do I experience powerlessness? And where does my life get unmanageable? It's the first step of 12-step fellowships. So if I can link and connect with you around your powerlessness, really what we were powerless over. So a voyeur might sit on a train and they look at they're taking in images of other people and they're powerless over that. And they might be in a meeting with an exhibitionist who likes to exhibit themselves. Now they've got two really different behaviors, but they could connect on how they do the powerlessness over it. So the powerless over the intrusive thoughts, the impaired thinking, the preoccupation, the ritual, acting out, the despair, the unmanageability. They can then also see the similarities there. So just becoming aware, am I distancing myself from getting support because I'm seeing myself as different than others? One of the key criteria features of addiction is denial, and one of the features of denial is comparison. And so it's looking at, well, am I just making myself different? Next one, taking prescription medications that are addictive for sleep problems, anxiety, or other issues. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I think it's important here that you say to people, look, if you're listening to this, speak to your doctor about it. But what I've learned, especially in 12-step fellowships for addictions with chemicals, mood and mind-altering chemicals, is it's in an addict's interest to let their surgeon or doctor know, I am in recovery for a 12-step program for addictions. Is there a less addictive option for me? And there is options. And if we don't tell our doctor this and then they start prescribing things that are addictive, it just opens up that door for the powerlessness. We keep secrets. We'll just have one prescription, then we get another. So just taking prescription medications that are addictive for sleep, anxiety, other problems. Can you talk to your doctor about other options by letting them know that you struggle with addiction issues? Lack of preparation for surgery or hospitalizations regarding medications, same deal. So if we go from our GP all the way to hospital, I know people in Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous, they just let their doctor know, their doctor lets their surgeon know. They look at other options. It's not about suffering in vain or trying to be brave. It's just saying to a doctor, look, I have a chemical addiction and I've suffered in the past. Is there other options? Or if I do go onto a medication that's addictive, can we be managing the aftercare of that? And so it's taking responsibility, not keeping secrets, letting people know, being transparent and honest. Get the support that you deserve and need so you don't activate your addiction and go back down that rabbit hole again. Another barrier for recovery is lack of sponsor or recovery peers, and one of the ways that we get those is through outreach calls. So people that make calls take calls. It's an horrific idea in early recovery to have to ring a stranger and tell them really something that's deeply happening for you. So a sponsor is someone in the fellowship that will help coach you through the steps based on their own experience. They're not self-help fellowships. They're mistakenly labeled as self-help fellowships. They're a spiritual fellowship, but we do keep what we have by giving it away. So when you get into the program, you get a sponsor, you work through the steps, you get an experience of working through the steps, and then other people come in after you where you can help guide them through that process. So a barrier to recovery is thinking I can go it alone. I don't need all that stuff. I'm not very good with people. They usually suggest you get a sponsor of the same sexual orientation. So men for men, women for women, gay and lesbian people do sort that out. That you want to keep lust out of it so you can just focus on the program. And so getting someone that can help you is an important, brave decision to make in early recovery. The other one are in our outreach calls. It's the spirit of the fellowship that what happens in meetings is great, but if you're triggered or going through a life issue that could trigger use in an isolation or another addiction, call somebody. So most fellowships have WhatsApp groups and phone lists that you can get on. It doesn't take long before you make some connections and start to call people. So if you haven't got a sponsor, if you haven't got some recovery peers, if you're not doing outreach calls, that could be a barrier to your recovery. People, places, and things. We can be powerless over our addiction, but we also can be powerless over people, places, and things. So not setting boundaries for people, places, and things that can trigger your addiction can be a real barrier for your recovery. I remember a church that I go to, street level community folks, great house church. They moved locations, and it moved my route to the church. And I remember riding towards church one day and I went past an old pub and I just remembered having a complete blackout drunk in there. And I remembered it because I made this phone call to the person I was going out with at the time to come and get me, because I had the car there, I had a meat around my arm. It was like, I just thought, if I'm about to lose consciousness here. And so I did that call that drunks do, can you come and get me? And then I think I started to go into blackout, and they did come and get me, and that was probably lucky, right? But I just remember, I remember drinking a beer I don't like the taste of, and I could really nearly have a body memory of that event. And I just thought, oh wow, that's that people, places, and things. I didn't feel triggered to go drink, but it just surprised me about the euphoric recall, how your brain can remember those things just by driving past that place. So you'll see people that some people can be really toxic, old dealers, old drug or acting out associates, people that get into sexual recovery that have affairs with others, shut down those relationships, block people, disconnect. So we go through a purging. If you're a drug addict, you'll get rid of the paraphernalia, the bongs, the needles, the different things you might have used. So whatever program you're in, if you're hanging on to something, there's a saying I have where you throw in the towel and stand on the corner. So if you're hanging on to going to an old place or hanging out with old people or hanging on to old things, maybe talk to someone about it and see if it's not there's not other options for better boundaries. Next one, not controlling stress, depression, anxiety, sleep problems, chronic pain, other problems. I'm aware that the word not controlling even stuck out for me, but it's what Patrick's written. And I think it could even be replaced with not taking responsibility. If we've got stress in our life, we might need to set some boundaries, make some decisions, let some things go. Recovery can't be added on to a crazy life. We've got to start to reassess putting recovery first and other things around it. If we've got depression and anxiety, we really might need to see somebody. They're deadly illnesses on their own, debilitating illnesses. So take responsibility. Go and see somebody, and you might have already tried that when you were acting out with your addictions. A lot of people go the doctor with alcoholism kept secret, say, Doc, I wake up every morning, I feel anxious and depressed, but they don't talk about the bottle of vodka they drank the night before. So look out, get some support, see somebody for that. Sleep problems. Dr. Andrew Huberman from the Huberman podcast has a great sleep program. I remember in early recovery, I didn't have any of that. I just knew I had to drink chamomile tea, write something in my journal, read some inspiring or uplifting literature. Thank God there wasn't phones back then for bedtime. And then listen to a cassette tape of someone in recovery. I found it much easier to go to sleep. I was listening to someone else's voice. I still do that now, but it's just on digital. I listen to sermons or recovery talks or an audio book, and it's amazing how it just offsets my brain and I can get some rest. The important thing is take some responsibility for it. If you used to smoke dope to get to sleep, well, you can't do that anymore. So you might need to work out a ritual or a routine, getting off screens earlier, no caffeine after, mid-afternoon, doing some stretching or doing something that's going to help you, right? If you've got chronic pain and other problems, now it's time to seek help because your addiction might have been a way you medicated that pain. Now we have to have other alternatives. So reach out and take responsibility for it. Don't use it as an excuse to violate your recovery. One of the things Carnes talks about, and it's everywhere, is exercise, good nutrition, and good sleep. It is what makes the organ of the brain and the embodied brain, the body, function. I will probably do some videos around resistance training, having good nutrition. What are your options? I really want to do some on, I think behind me you can see books under that coffee table. Dr. Christopher Palmer, Brain Energy, Lustig, Dr. Lustig on metabolical, and I think Dr. Jason Fung on ketogenic eating and fasting. I'll do a video just on those three things alone. But engaging in a healthy lifestyle, moving, sunlight, Huberman, he talks about this too in the Huberman lab. What do we need to function, to have mitochondrial energy? And, so it took me a while to really understand that. My days these days start with listening to spiritual content, and I run and do stairs, and I do pull-ups and push-ups, and I'm no gym junkie. I just use the gym down the park, but it's changed my life. And then carnivore and ketogenic eating, non-processed food, it just changes the way you experience life. And I am pretty convinced. Have a look at Dr. Christopher Palmer, Brain Energy, personality disorders, spectrum disorders, sleep problems, irritable bowel, stress, all the stresses in the body, carnivore, ketogenic eating. There's some real benefits where people change and reverse diabetes, obesity. It's worth exploring and can be a barrier to your recovery. Because if you're wanting to feel good, but you're not doing what you need to feel good, then you won't feel good. And then addiction just creeps back in. Oh, well, what's the point? I don't feel any better. I might as well go back to using. So check it out. Check it out. See what you think. It might be a barrier to recovery. Lack of passions. Early on, yes, 90 meetings, 90 days. That takes quite a commitment. But I remember in early recovery, I took up skateboarding. I had to get to and from the station. The buses used to run out by the time the meetings were over. When I got back, I lived about 1.5 miles away from the station when I lived at Cabramatta. And so I rode an old skateboard. Now I've got a shed with a bunch of skateboards in. I still ride with my sons. It was a fun activity. And there's a saying, hang loose and be a goose in 12-step recovery. Just go back to enjoying yourself. Stop worrying about what everyone's thinking. They're going to think it anyway. So you might as well have fun while they're thinking about you. And my first sponsor taught me to play guitar. I mean, you can't see them now, I don't think, but there's like it's over here, a whole bunch of guitars. That's been a passion all recovery. And my first sponsor taught me to play. He was a Paul Kossoff fan, and still play in a band, and nothing fancy. My ego wanted to be rich and famous, but I'm just grateful I got to play music. When I got to recovery, I didn't know my dyslexia and ADHD was stopping me learning, so I couldn't read music. But now I play by ear, and really have been grateful that recovery steals time. Addiction steals time. Recovery gives it back. So you get a chance to try stuff, even if you don't like it. For some of us, we've got to try things and move on until we find that thing. And you see people in recovery, they take up passions. We have to be careful because we can easily get obsessed with them and do it too much. But it's one of the great gifts of recovery that we get our life back and we get time back to do it. Last but not least is the halts. You watch out for the halts of recovery. If you're feeling off tap, bit edgy, think the Americans call it squirrely, then there might be a lack of self-care happening. Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? I just had I do a 20-minute drift session every day. I lay down, binaural beats, blackout face mask. I just breathe. I say a little prayer and I drift and I go to sleep. These days the habit is so entrenched. I do it once a day. It just refreshes me. I wake up before the alarm. I set it for 20 minutes so I don't go into REM sleep. It's about finding those things that rest us. Loneliness that can creep up on somebody. If you've got developmental trauma, a dysfunctional childhood, and we don't do relationships well, we can have attachment problems, and we really can suffer from abandonment issues. So in recovery, outreach calls, letting people know what's happening for you. Getting angry, and a lot of the time anger is a mask for something else underneath. So if you're angry, check it in with someone, talk to someone. Again, food. A lot of the time, if you're eating processed food, you're going to experience a lot of hunger because it's just paper on the fire. It doesn't last. It doesn't satiate. So look at your diet, but at the very least, eat something if you're hungry. Like sometimes addicts have got poor self-care and they don't drink. I know the other one for T and AA is thirsty. If you feel like a drink, oh, I haven't drank any water today. So if I eaten today? Did I miss lunch? Did I skip it? Did I not pay attention to my needs? And I'm not in the rhythm of looking after myself. So watch out for the halts of recovery. So as I said, this information has come from Patrick Carnes, Facing Addiction, with the other co-authors of Stephanie Carnes and John Bailey. It's an awesome book for all sorts of addictions. I do use He's Facing the Shadow just for sex addiction, but this is a great workbook. It's imposing and big, but it's got a lot of areas to write. Look up Patrick Carnes, look up ITAP, the International Institute of Addiction, Trauma and Addiction Professionals. But that's a great book if you really want to work on your addictions. And 12-step meetings. There's a 12-step meeting for every ailment. Look them up. I think Russell Brand wrote a great book called Recovery and certainly said it sort of pushed people towards that option as a way of dealing with things. So for MOvember, I'm not going to do a movie every day, a video every day, but I am going to dive into this MOvember campaign. I will put in the link of the YouTube video, the MOvember page on there. I've got a few events here, Men's Fire, John Lee speaking from Alabama on the Shadow. For men, I've got a MOvember stock event where the worship band I'm in is playing we're having a blues and barbecue day. So there'll be a few things to check out, and if you can, please donate. Reach out and get the help you need, and I'll talk to you again soon.